sustainability in business, which is a bit of a mouthful, but what it really means is that we are a news and information website. We talk about the role of business in building a more sustainable world. I'm going to stand up. Usually we're in the other room and we're up high, so it's a little weird to be sitting so low. Hopefully you can see us. Tonight is our monthly event, which we call Stories and Beer, which essentially means we have beer and we tell stories. We invite some interesting folks to have a seat with you and talk about a topic. Tonight's topic we're calling Mobile Innovation for Good. I'll let the gentlemen who've agreed to join us tonight explain a little bit about what that means for their respective organizations. But first things first, a little special thanks to Impact Hub Bay Area for hosting us this evening. Is anyone not familiar with the Hub? Not been here before? A couple of folks, okay. Essentially, the Hub is a shared workspace. It's also an investor, but it's also an incubator for companies, nonprofits, organizations who have some kind of social or environmental angle to how they're doing business. And we work out of the Hub. Some of the folks in the back, Carrie is running around here somewhere. We'll be happy to answer your questions about the Hub, should you be interested in workspace or otherwise working with the Hub. Also a shout out to Presidio Graduate School. Bethany is in the back there, she's waving. Presidio Graduate School is an MBA program, MPA program, and also recently offering a degree in sustainability for sports, which is quite an interesting subject, and she'd be happy to answer any questions that you have and has some things to give away back there as well. And without further ado, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves. We have Cole Gill, who's the CEO of LaborVoices. Nishan Pagadia, I hope I didn't butcher your last name. If I did, just go ahead and repronounce it. He's with an organization called Rainforest Connection. And then, of course, Matt Bauer with Better World Wireless. And just so you guys know, the format tonight is really, I'm going to lay these guys go through about 15 minutes tops of questioning, and then really it's up to you guys to do the Q&A. And so get your questions ready, and we'll pass around a mic if we've got one. If we don't, you'll just have to shout. But the majority of the time tonight is really about you and the folks up here and creating a conversation about this technology and what it can do for good. So, Cole, you want to just give us a little background on LaborVoices, and we'll go down the line?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks, Nick, for having us, and thanks to the Hub for hosting this. As Nick said, I founded LaborVoices. Started about 4 years ago. If you go far enough back, I'm actually a semiconductor physicist by training, and eventually I made my way into the U.S. State Department doing international labor rights and corporate social responsibility, which is a long way of saying I connected between government and companies and labor groups around the world to help make sure that workers are being treated well. While I was doing that, I noticed that workers had access to mobile phones, and there was a real potential to connect workers with each other and to extract from workers what they're actually seeing in supply chains around the world. So after leaving the State Department and coming to the Bay Area, I started LaborVoices in 2010, and now we've been active in about 6 countries, and we connect with those workers through their mobile phones. We create essentially, we think of it as a trip advisor for workers so that they know where the best jobs are, while at the same time we're aggregating intelligence from them that is valuable for supply chain managers, for multinational companies to know exactly how those factories are being run.
In other words, the 30-second version, so folks can communicate through their mobile device to talk about the conditions at the factory or other places of employment.
Yeah, we turn worker voices into supply chain.
Beautiful. Nishan?
Great. Yeah, my name is Nishan Pagadia. So thanks again for having us, Nick and Jewel Pundit and the Hub and all you guys for coming here late in the evening. Also to be on this esteemed panel with these folks, so that's great. My background is not necessarily anything to do with the rainforest. Besides, all of us probably hearing about saving the rainforest ever since we were in grade school. But it came through sort of doing a number of different startups in the impact space. And so my last one was in digital health, trying to give patients access to surgical care they couldn't get locally, and then also trying to measure impact in different ways. And so this one definitely resonates on that scale in terms of how we're trying to create a global solution to stop deforestation. So Rainforest Connection is really, it's preventing global deforestation and fighting climate change with mobile technology that can real time stream the activities of the forest and illegal activity, such that we can send alerts to local enforcement to be on the spot. So that's kind of the summary.
So can you hold up the device here? But in a nutshell, right, these are recycled phones. You got some solar panels on them. You guys are putting them out in the rainforest, just listening for the sound of logging, and then somehow it sends a report somewhere?
Yeah, basically, I mean, this flower-like device here, which is, you know, our latest model, version 2.0, is it's definitely that. So we try to, our cost of good is very little. So it's all Android phones inside that black box amongst some other hardware, and then it's all actually reused solar panels. So when you cut solar panels, actually, they're in silicone wafer chips, and they want to keep straight edges. So the trimmings actually can be reused, and that's what these are. And so we reuse the trimmings and put them in series here to be able to basically transfer energy under the canopy, which is a problem we talk about, which we have to solve. It's very dark and rainy often. So yeah, this is what, it's got a high-def microphone on the bottom that transmits sound from about 3 square kilometers roughly. So we triangulate data and send it to a cloud API.
Too cool, Matt. Better world.
Well, that is cool. Ours is a little simpler than that. That we, how many people here? Well, first off, thank you all for coming, and thanks Nick for hosting. Great to these guys, and look forward to your questions. So, how many of you have a cell phone and have service on a cell phone? So we provide, Better World Wireless is a combination. Think of like Virgin Mobile and Tom Shoes. So we have the buy one, get one model. Our mission is to, over the next 10 years, serve 1 million people through donations of devices to programs through giving partners that our customers, by just signing on with us, spur within 3 months a device that goes out to someone in need through an established giving partner. And the early ones that we have that we're working with are Black Girls Code, and we're heavily partnered with nonprofits in general. We're for-profit, but TechSoup Global is a partner that we've donated a number of devices to. Black Girls Code and Will Reader. We just delivered our first school in sub-Saharan Africa. Just received a kit of mobile Kindles, and first of many that we hope. So we're unabashedly, we take on AT&T and Verizon as our competition. I've been in the industry 30 years, which is, I just counted that up a few days ago actually. It's a long time. I've been studying or working in it, starting with my mom. She stood there with me at Indiana University and said, well, why don't you do telecommunications? You're a good communicator. So that was I really thought through that one. So I started in telecom that way. And for the last 15 years, I've been with a few companies, mainly Better World Telecom, which preceded this, as a laboratory for looking at how do we use the industry itself. So these guys are doing some really cool stuff by using the technology and adapting it. So we're actually Trojan horse into the industry, which is not known as a sustainable leader, as a social impact leader, and really trying to create this model from inside looking. So that's a brief history of it.
So in a nutshell, it's basically a kind of a one-to-one now with the Tom's Shoes of wireless. Sort of. They don't.
Yeah. They wouldn't want us to say that. I think they have a few trademarks, etc. on that. But and since this is being broadcast to millions and millions of people worldwide, I cannot say that. And now that the lawyers from Big Capital on their side, I don't want to get them out. So we're using a very, very successful one-for-one model. My co-founder, one of my co-founders, Amy Tucker, who had the ideas in the audience here, about taking mobile and doing a one-for-one, and it's we're now all of 4 months old, and but it's going great. So.
Very cool. I want to know a few more details about this stuff because I got a lot of things going through my head. So I actually want to sort of go down the line one more time and just ask you guys to get into a little bit more detail of the nuts and bolts of how it works. And starting with you, Cole, how does this actually manifest, right? We got workers out there, they got mobile devices. What exactly are they reporting? And who pays for this? You said that it's the the companies on the far end of the supply chain that are actually, they want this information. Is that how it works out? Tell us how it works.
So a lot of you may remember the issues that Apple had with their supply chain, suicizing their supply chain. Here recently, Samsung has recently found child labor in their suppliers in China. And of course, there's a factory collapse in Bangladesh last year. That happens quite often, but the biggest one in recorded history happened last year. Killed over 2,000 workers. So these tragic events happen, and a lot of big multinational companies find themselves sort of on the hook. Even though they don't own these factories, they're sourcing from these factories, and consumers and other folks find them responsible for the conditions. Now, most of these companies have codes of conduct that they require their suppliers to follow. If you're going to sell things to Apple, you've got to meet this checklist. But then at the end of the day, who's going to check to see if people are actually following? And are you really going to wait until things go haywire before you actually find out? So right now, companies send inspectors in to check regularly, every year, every couple of years, to send an inspector in. But by the time an inspector gets to a factory, the factory's been cleaned up, the workers have all been coached on what to say, and so an inspection isn't really worth very much. And so we connect directly with those workers through the existing mobile phones using an audio platform. So workers, even if they're illiterate or they don't have, they can't SMS in their language or what have you, they can still interact with us through simple phone calls. And you can think of it as a hotline plus. So rather than a hotline where workers just call in when there's an issue, we're actually serving workers on a regular basis. We're actually pushing information to workers on a regular basis that lets them know about what opportunities there are available to them, job opportunities, training opportunities, and surveying them regularly on how have you been treated today, have you been paid on time, very basic questions. And aggregate that information up into intelligence that these companies pay for, and at the same time we're providing this service to workers for free. So a couple of different examples of the benefit side of what we do is in Cambodia we have a partnership with the ILO where we're actually canvassing all of the apparel factories in Cambodia and gathering information across all of those workers, creating a database that essentially workers can use to find out how their factory ranks. Where can you get paid the best wages? Which factories are going to give you the maternity leave that you're supposed to get? Those kinds of things. They can actually see where the best places are to work, or here, I should say, where the best places are to work. And at the same time, we gather that information and supply that to companies. Second example, and I'll stop, is in a lot of you may have heard about after the Brazil World Cup. Now there's a Qatar 2022 World Cup that's being a lot of construction for it, and there's a lot of labor abuses in Qatar, to put it mildly. And there's a lot of companies that really want to invest there, and they're willing to invest the money to make sure that workers are being treated well. So we're working on a couple of projects that will build similar kind of databases, similar kind of registries for recruitment agencies as well, so that a worker, when they're approached by a recruiter in a village, can fact check that recruiter and say, is what this recruiter is telling me actually going to happen, or am I going to end up in a forced labor situation in essentially a slave state of the Gulf? So that's the kind of thing that we're doing on the benefit side. And of course, on the for-profit side, we're producing intelligence for the person.
So it's interesting to me to hear that the impetus for this is actually seems to be coming from the companies themselves, as opposed to what you might expect, like grassroots labor groups or something like that. Could you just tell us a little bit about, what's motivating them, besides the goodness of their hearts, to make this happen?
They're the only ones there, essentially. So in most of these countries, it's so hard for workers to organize that the unions just don't exist. And when unions do exist, oftentimes they're company-owned unions, they're not really legitimate. And so it's really difficult for legitimate labor organizers to get in and actually represent workers' interests. So in that vacuum, someone's got to step in. Otherwise, you have real tragedies that happen. And we've seen the results of some of those tragedies, and companies don't want to be on the hook. A lot of the companies that we deal with would prefer that their workers be unionized. The factories that they source from, that they have unionized workers. But that's not something that you can sort of wave a magic wand to do. It's a long process. It's democracy building at its core. And so, so in the gap, what companies are doing is saying we at least need to know what our risks are. We at least need to mitigate those risks. So let's do something rather than doing nothing. That's what these companies are doing, and we're sort of looking into that and saying not only can you do something, but you can actually do something really interesting. Provide a real service for the workers that are in your supply chain and actually understand way more about your supply chain than you ever thought you could, and drive real operational returns from that as well.
So Rainforest. So you guys, Rainforest Connection, you guys had a Kickstarter campaign. You hit your goal. What's the plan now? You're going to be building a bunch of these things. Where are you getting the materials from? Where are they going to go? And how does it actually work?
Yeah, sure. So a few questions there. Kickstarter campaign was great, so thanks for anybody all who supported or passed it around. And so we met our no-wave goal, but our first stretch goal, which was taking devices to the Amazon as well. So the real funding for that is going to, yes, building about 50 devices. And in terms of sourcing, right now we're working with a solar manufacturer right here in California, as well as exploring other partners who might be able to do that in different places. For example, doing it in country so it's cheaper, based on where we're going. So we go to Brazil to manufacture there, and perhaps it's even cheaper for us to not have to import this in. But second of all, then the phones are, anybody can donate their phones, so we can give you an address, you can send your phone. But that's how we have all our phones. That source. The main cost other than that is the hardware that's going into the actual black box here, which basically is most of that hardware is to be able to transfer the energy from the actual panels to actually power the devices. And also, of course, the high-def microphone that can pick up the sound frequency.
And what's it listening for? Chainsaws? Something like that?
So it's actually real-time streaming all sounds, all ambient sound, from as low as I think 10 hertz. And going pretty high. And that means that if we'll have lots of recordings on a Kickstarter page, and you can send it around. Anybody wants to hear it. It's amazing. You can hear like every single animal that is within a certain distance, and it sounds it's very machine-like. It sounds very civilized in a very remote forest way. But it's very vibrant, I guess. So the sounds are easy to pick up, and the device itself is really there to capture the sounds. Not so much to do a type of churning of the data in the system. That would take too much power. So what we're doing is on 5-minute batches, actually sending the data up to our cloud web services, basically. And that's where we actually look at the signatures to see if there's any difference between the ambient and something like a chainsaw.
Is it within range of a cell tower, or is it satellite? What's it talking to?
So far, like in Sumatra, where we implemented, we have it there at Gibbons Reserve right now. They have a cellular GSM connection. And so we've been able to stream data. It's all through cellular connection right now. And right now, the interesting thing about it is that we're not using a phone as you would every day. So you're going to have high battery life, and half a day later you use taking too many pictures, and now you can't use your iPhone, right? It's more like it's really like less than 1 bar, pretty much, of needed a service, if you will, to be able to do the work. And that said, I think the amount of energy we can actually transfer and store, which is what, again, a lot of hardware is doing there, allows us to keep the device power for a pretty long time so that we can actually do that type of communication.
Okay, so let's say it picks up something, an undesirable sound, then what happens?
Yes, the undesirable sounds, for example, let's say it's the sound of a truck, because logging, you're going to need to have trucks, and that's not normal for rainforest. That, or of course, a chainsaw, which means by then maybe the first tree is starting to be cut down. So those two things, again, with such a distinct frequency, it'll immediately basically allow us, within a few seconds, send an SMS signal to the actual local enforcement that have been partnered with us. So the nice thing so far, with both in Cameroon, which is where we're going next, as well as the Amazon, the people who are inviting us there, which has been a great thing to be able to do, say that, is that they actually have enforcement there, but they still have a persistent problem with the logging and the poaching. So the issue is how do we detect this? Because 5 minutes away, organically, is very difficult to hear in rainforest. And actually, that's what happened to us in Indonesia the first time when Topher went there, is that 5 minutes away, there's people cutting down the trees, but then our device picked it up, and on day 2, we heard the chainsaw. So it sends an SMS signal immediately to local enforcement, and that provided with the phones too, and they're able to then be on site to actually have the encounter.
And have you had encounters yet? Has it actually played out?
Yeah, so when we tested this, our first pilot was last year in Indonesia, a Gibbons Reserve. Gibbons are these big, cute monkeys. If you want to see it, go to our Kickstarter page. About that. But anyways, they're endangered, and so they have, again, a problem for illegal logging in that area. And we set up 4 devices, and on the second day, actually, when Topher was in the field, they had gotten, again, that sound. They got an alert, he got an email saying, this is basically some sort of illegal activity sound, but they couldn't hear it. I think when they tried to hear it very closely, they might have heard some sound, but they couldn't really do it organically. So they actually they arrived on site within 5 minutes, and sure enough, I think half a tree or something was already cut down. And it turns out in this particular area, the actual loggers were folks that were known in the community, which is not abnormal. So a lot of the people who get jobs to do logging are known in the community. They're not just people that are just foreigners coming in taking all the logging. So I think the interesting thing there was that as soon as they had an encounter with people they knew on the local enforcement, it was more like, okay, we've been stopped, we're going to be deterred, and ever since then they haven't actually come back. So, and it was a very friendly encounter actually. And there was not like, I think it's very different when you have 10 trucks coming in and many acres or hectares of land is already been cut down. At that point, we try to stop somebody via satellite imagery that came in a day later. Now it's a criminal offense. It's perhaps a violent encounter. It's much different when you have a tree or one tree cut down, which is what we're holding.
And one more question, we'll go over to Matt. This says Kickstarter. How is this project rolling?
Yeah, I think that's really exciting for us that we're exploring right now. So far, the first 3 to 5 pilots, we're working with sort of both nonprofits and local indigenous populations who are actually supporting us to contribute revenue, so some sort of grant or some sort of donation. That's happening both in the Amazon as well as Cameroon, working with the Zoological Society of London. Thereafter, the models that we're implementing are twofold. One is, we really see that technology is enabling the service. It's not really some sort of high-tech technology. We're using waste and using it. And for a new application, we're actually providing a service to protect a certain area of land that previously didn't exist, right? And I think in that model, what we're exploring is doing a price per hectare per land. So if we're gonna do 10 cents per hectare per month, that allows you to protect that area. That's one of the sort of leading models right now for revenue, and it's actually a much lower barrier for entry. It's not like we're going to charge you $100,000 to come out there, which again, technically satellite systems or other types of current alternative technologies might cost a lot more, and they're not going to be as fast in terms of the actual build out. So, and I think the second thing that we're really excited about is that we're working with a sponsorship model. So more and more corporations, L'Oreal and others, are starting to make claims we're going to remove all palm oil from all of our ingredients by 2020. And for them, being able to, of course, say that they have a certain area of land that they're protecting is a big deal. So going forward, we're actually producing a consumer application whereby the data that's coming in here is actually ones that we can stream to the cloud. It doesn't mean that only us and the people we alert first responders need to hear it. We're setting up consumer apps so all of us can listen to it in real time. And part of that is that, one day we have 10 million consumers listening in onto, the Gibbon in Indonesia or other types of live stream. It's a whole new relationship that's being built with the Rainforest, with the consumer app, and hopefully a whole new type of advocacy. And so at that point, when an alert comes in, it's sponsored by L'Oreal, for example, one of the things we're exploring there is if we have paid sponsorships, that part of that revenue actually goes back to the local region, indigenous population there, so that there's now incentive for them to not have to cut the tree down too, because that's another thing we can talk about, which is they don't have jobs to do cut down trees, hunting like that.
Yeah, I want to get into that social question too, but then I want to give you a chance to get us a little bit more into the details, the better world. I understand the one-to-one model. Tell us a little bit more about how that works, where those phones go, why it matters.
Okay. I'll just speak of what's happened so far. Our demand for the impact side of the house has far outstripped the customer acquisition side. So we feel very comfortable that we have plenty of places to donate the phones to. Here's two more examples right here. I mean, the amazing thing is being inside the industry and looking out in this particular way, we see so many programs from healthcare workers to getting kids in schools in remote places, the content they need to learn, to safety issues, to environmental issues, to labor. I mean, all these things are going on out there, right? There's millions and millions of efforts that unfortunately don't make it to the headlines of the news. And so that's really our muse. And so examples so far, we saw it to be initially more, we didn't think there'd be a huge demand for this in the US. So when we started, we thought, oh, okay, the CARES of the world and the UNICEFs of the world, and great, they're gonna eat this up. But we've actually been focused a lot on programs here locally in San Francisco, which has been really cool, like standing out in our building, we're on the other side of the building from Twitter, and looking down, for instance, at the homeless population in the Tenderloin and in San Jose and all over the area. You know, we said, well, gosh, there's something that we must be able to do, and sure enough, we met an organization called the Community Technology Alliance that is just finished a 2-year study of how mobile can help get people back into the workforce, how it can help people get back into homes and housing, and get them health and get them the things they need. Well, great. So then Google steps up with a $350,000 device donation, and other funders have stepped in. And so we're actually going to launch a product line, I guess we will, for the homeless in the Bay Area, called Mobile for All, and in the fall, and we're really excited about that. You know, on any given night, there are 3 million homeless in the U.S., and there's huge impact potential there. The Black Girls Code is a wonderful organization. Most of you have probably heard, but they teach STEM, essentially programming STEM programs to girls of color all around the country, but they're starting here in California and are doing amazing work. So we were able to donate 100 smartphones to them so that they could start teaching mobile apps and mobile programming through some of their programs as well. And really excited about our new partnership with CARE, where their M Health Alliance with the Gates Foundation in Bihar, India, they have about 100,000 mobile health workers that need devices, need newer devices, and so we're starting to look at how we get as many of those 100,000 out there as we can. And these are just, you know, we're just scratching the surface. The pervasive, the amazing ability of mobile when used and the latest technologies to amp up programs like what you, we don't need to go any further than what you're hearing tonight. I mean, these are the heroes. They're on the ground. They're doing the work. They're actually doing the programs. And what can we do to support them? And tying the consumers in with that, where we turn this me device into a we device. So what's happening? What programs are coming out of me being part of this network as opposed to another network? And then how do we look at the next phase of this, which is our end state, which is to not just do this ourselves, but to take the Stonyfield model in Dannon, where Stonyfield now, inside of Dannon, created Dannon to be the largest organic dairy supplier in the world. And inside our industry, which is the largest industry in the world, it's the largest connected industry, almost $3 trillion in revenues in just the telecom carrier space. So add up the Verizons, add up the AT&Ts, Those two alone are 250 billion in revenues. And what happens if we activate that? And everybody's got this stuff now, right? What about Telecom Italia? What about British Telecom? What about Telstra? And activating those entities that have the relationship with people on the ground. This is the opportunity to create a consciousness, help create a consciousness, because all of a sudden from 2006, when there were 250,000 smartphones in the US, to 2007 when the iPhone came out, there's millions, and now there's billions in the world. That's going to be 5 billion by 2020 in smartphones in people's hands. Well, how do we make that work for us? You know, how do we make it spur programs like this? Because for a lot of people, they're just making that leap. They're doing things in countries now that we're not doing here around mobile banking, around mobile money. You know, when you look at some of the countries and the banks are just, they're not even equating anymore. It's just going right around them and creating these systems that are much more efficient and getting people what they need. So in a way, the developing world has an opportunity to just leapfrog decades that, you know, we were messing around and able to get right into what's going on. And the networks are getting there too, so go on for hours, but I'll stop there.
That's great. Yeah, I have about 100 more questions. This is just fantastic. I really want to give you guys the chance to start jumping in. So does anybody want to go first? Otherwise, I'll just keep on rolling. Let's just do this in order. So we'll start with you, and then we're going to work our way around.
So two-part question for you all. What gave you the idea? And secondly, what's happening in your life at the time that made you act on it?
For inspiration.
My answer is probably going to be a little more boring than the others, because I mean, this is me personally. There's 4 of us who co-founded the company. This is my life's work. Like I said, I've been at it, you know, chunking away in the industry for 30 years, playing around with the social environmental impact model, and it became super, you know, for us about 2 years ago that mobile is so pervasive and has such an ability to impact that we started seriously looking at doing this, but also we need the consumer model to catch up. So phone unlocking, the price of devices coming down, our ability to compete with AT&T and Verizon. I only mention them because they have 8.5 out of 10 people in the US as customers. So that's all we need to focus on. Everybody else is just a rounding error, basically. And so the inspiration was enabled finally because the market conditions were such that we could enter without having to raise millions of dollars, without having to have dozens of people, and the systems have all caught up too. And then having a team together that has the impact side, the relationships already in place, so that we didn't have to go figure that out too. Everything sort of arrived at the station at the same time. And but you know, the genesis of the one-for-one model for us was literally the light bulb that went off, and that was, I wish Amy was up here talking about that. That's what really kicked our model into gear, and it gave it the transparency, it gives it the ability to connect to these types of organizations, large and small, and to create something that consumers can very easily communicate with in their minds too, that really gelled the whole thing together. And that was sort of our aha moment.
So I can give you 2 versions of it too. My personal one is a little bit more dull than my co-founders, who's a lot more sexy on the story side. But I guess one of the things that motivated me, so once I used to do consulting in one of the big 4s, and I wasn't quite satisfied with some of the things that we were helping our companies accomplish by becoming billion-dollar organizations, right? Selling more products and consumer goods that I wasn't quite, you know, aligned with in terms of sustainability and environmental impact, all those sort of things. And so once I got into my first startup, again, it was all focused on the idea of how do I now only work in businesses where I feel like in order for us to become a billion-dollar business, we're actually doing billions of dollars worth of good, and they're doing a really tight business model. So ever since that, I've sort of filtered that away. So I was exploring doing some consulting actually with the fine folks upstairs, Schaefer and Combs, just a plug for them, who do impact consulting, and that's one of the, also colleague and friend Topher. His story, which is the sexy version here, he was actually on a project in Indonesia, and he was at a Gibbons Reserve, and Topher being so what happened was that, again, 5 minutes away, there were people cutting down trees in this reserve, and they couldn't hear it. So, Topher being a physicist and software engineer, he noticed there was a cell phone connection there, and so there has to be some way to basically, leverage this type of connectivity to do something about this problem. And so he worked on this fine flower-like device here since then, and I think with his sort of engineering prowess and sort of the business and political side of things that the other co-founders bring, we're able to sort of take this forward. So that's kind of the
I didn't know Topher was a physicist. That's kind of interesting. It shows what kind of trouble you can get up to when a physicist is trying to loose on a really thorny problem. So I started off as a physicist, and I had, for a long time, I was kind of following my nose from physics, which I love, to impact, which I really wanted to be a part of. And I made my way to India, did a bit of volunteer work there, and eventually into U.S. government work, which led me into the State Department. And I kind of weaseled my way into the Human Rights Bureau because, for whatever reason, they had a funny earmark that needed a scientist to run, and it was crazy. So I ended up doing mostly labor and CSR work. And one of the interesting things that I saw there was that we have really interesting treaties with a lot of countries around the world that they give really awesome trade benefits to these countries, but only if they uphold their labor and environmental protections. NAFTA is one of those, and many other free trade agreements have those provisions in them. The trick is, how do you actually enforce them? And so when I was in government, I was one of maybe 10 or 20 people that were charged with enforcing these provisions on the labor side. So then the question becomes, well, how do you actually measure how labor provisions are actually, how workers are being protected in a given country? And the ways that the state of the art for measuring this is still the state of the art until now is you've got an NGO like Human Rights Watch or International Trade Union Federation kind of goes in and makes a report, but those reports take 6 months to come out. I mean, this is really not very fresh data. So you've got the governments coming in to the State Department and to the U.S. government, other foreign governments coming in and saying, no, we fixed all those problems, don't worry about that, everything's fine. Industry comes in and says, oh, no, everything's fine. So you really don't have a lot of good data on which to make a decision, even if you had a U.S. government that actually wanted to make some sharp decisions on. So that was pretty frustrating as a scientist not to be able to measure the thing that you're there to make decisions on. So I was thinking about that. And I was on a trip to Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, courtesy of your tax dollars. And I was there to investigate on these trade and labor issues. And I noticed when I was there that all these workers had mobile phones, and I started asking them, well, gosh, I mean, do you use these? How do you use your mobile phones? Do you use them to connect with other workers? Do you use them to organize? Do you use them to at least know where the best jobs are? And to a woman, they said no. That they're using them to call their family, and that's pretty much it. Their available services are available. So I'm thinking, well, clearly there's something there. Clearly these workers should be connected, and clearly I shouldn't be the one doing it. Somebody else should do it. Like, there's all these other nonprofits and technology companies that should be going out and doing this stuff. It's really easy to do. I mean, I'm a physicist. Of course, everything seems easy when you want to do it. And so I started thinking about that, and I pulled together my thoughts into a white paper, and I started sharing with everybody who would listen. And I said, hey, we should do this. I was still in government, and I went to USAID and said, hey, we should do this. State Department and the Department of Labor and all these folks who have money that they shovel out the door to organizations that should be doing this. Everybody said that's a great idea, but we need somebody to actually do it, and the government doesn't do these things. So okay, so I go to the NGOs and I say, hey, you should do this. Hey, you're a labor organization, yeah. Go to technology companies, and everybody says, hey, it's a great idea, but sort of a chicken and egg. Pretty frustrating. But when I went to the companies that were involved, and I remember going to companies that people in this room are wearing right now. I went to some of these clothing companies. I said, hey, wouldn't this be a great way to get data on your supply chain? And they were like, oh, I'd pay for that. I said, oh, hey, that's interesting. We can actually make it a profitable business. Put that into a white paper, circulated around, got maybe 20 or 30 people to kind of sign on to that paper as being supporters of that. But still, nothing really moved. And my time within government was a limited term fellowship position because they don't like to keep scientists around that long. So they kicked me out. And then I ended up in the Bay Area. I joined my partner here. She's now an engineer at Google. And I came here, and having a background in the semiconductor business. And my first job in government was actually the Department of Energy. So I said, okay, let's shelve all these kind of crazy ideas. Let's go work in the energy sector because that's where you should be. That's where your training is. I started applying for energy jobs, and I didn't get a single response. My heart was really dying, and I was just moping around, and I still had this idea kind of gnawing in the back of my head. So I started talking with people in this area, people at Over-the-Yard Network, School Foundation, and really anybody I could talk to, just network my way out to all kinds of people. And about four separate times, people said, because I would go to them and I'd say, look at the energy sector, it kind of sucks. I want to do something in impact, and I have quantitative skills, so maybe I could help invest in, sustainable businesses. I could help move money. I could be sort of a portfolio manager. And four times people said, one, the last public sector job you, Cole, had, last public sector job you had was flipping burgers in high school. There's no way in hell that you're going to move money for anything. Right? But this idea that you keep talking about is interesting. And so if you've got the resources, then you should, try it for a year and see what happens. So after hearing that a few times, I said, okay, maybe I should try it for a year. Talk to my partner, and she's like, this is the only thing you've been excited about in like 6 months. You're ridiculous if you do not try this. So with that kind of support, I had to. That 1 year experiment has now failed 4 years in a row. And now we've got a company, we've got a great team. One of our team members is here. I use she's in the front row of that t-shirt. And that's how we got going. So I was really, to say what was happening in my life, I was mopey and looking for something to do, and had this idea in the back of my head. The one thing that really kind of turned me to do it, though, I have to say, when I was growing up, my dad, who's immigrated here from India, and made the great choice to settle in Mississippi of all this, he had a string of businesses that he tried. Convenience store, movie theater, dry cleaners, all kinds of businesses, and they all failed. They all failed horribly. And so seeing that, I was like, oh, why the hell would anybody start their own business? That's ridiculous. But when I thought about this, I said, look, connecting workers with each other is not that big of an idea. Somebody's going to do it. But the person that does it will have an immense amount of power and could use that very easily. It would be really easy to survey a bunch of workers about what they think about their employer, and then out all the troublemakers, get them fired or worse, and take a big kickback from the local management. That would be trivial. There's a lot of really easy ways to really abuse this kind of power. So the first person on the market really needs to do it right. You need to set the bar really high, great user experience, sort of take the market and move it in a good direction. So that's what really kind of pushed me over the edge to say, okay, yeah, most businesses fail the first 5 years. Thanks to taking labor ones that are 4 years old. So, but yeah, that's how we got this.
Right, thanks guys. Let's start with you, and let's go to relatively, we have a lot of questions, so let's go to relatively quick answer mode here. Let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Hannah. So my question really surrounds marketing. So after you've exhausted kind of your personal network, how did you continue to market your idea and your products and services? And then the second part to that is what are some of the critical points that you took that switched people way, doing more than just telling you, oh, this is a great idea. I'm actually going to do something with it.
Who's ready?
Are you talking about before we launched the company, or are you talking about?
Just at the very initial stages, right? Like after
Yeah.
you told people what to do, like how did you get more people into what
Sure.
you're doing?
Well, sorry, but we definitely are currently in the initial stages, so there's no past. So, I mean, I think one of the issues we were seeing in terms of how we initially approached this was that we're still in pilot phase, so we wanted to do a proof of concept. And we weren't out there trying to market this virally in a way that, said this is very effective and it's going to work. And this is the solution to stopping deforestation legally. And we're still not saying that. So I think our marketing dollars weren't really spent, or any dollars weren't really spent on formal type of marketing or trying to do some sort of consumer viral strategy. However, what we're finding is that through one of the reasons we chose crowdfunding to sort of launch this whole thing is that not only is it a way to get people more aware of what we're trying to do, we had 2,500 backers, which is amazing, and all of them are now advocates for what we're doing. So it was a great way for us. We saw it as an investment in not just raising money for us, but doing kind of marketing there. And now they're voices for they're champions for our product. But they're also one of the things that we're trying to do is open source data for all the sound that comes in, all the frequency. We're allowing anybody to basically access that and build hopefully third-party apps that can do more with the data than we can. And so one of the things we want to do is start building a community. So we had a lot of press coverage around not only our campaign, but of what we're trying to do as a vision with this data. So our marketing strategy so far has been reflective just around fundraising. But I think with the mobile consumer app and with the idea of trying to build like a real community around this type of data, I think we're going to have a lot of fun strategies that we're trying to take this campaign forward.
Got anything to say?
If we want to keep rolling, but I can.
Yeah, give us the short and sweet.
I don't know. It's hard to mix all together the things that we've had to do. I mean, our partnership front, our investment front. So we have a lot of investors so far. We're getting more on. So we're a more traditional kind of mode of going out, raising capital, starting a company. Actually, we started a company and then raising capital. But our marketing, we're going to be taking on two of the biggest companies in the world. So we have to be super nimble about how we do that, and we're totally employing more judo strategy instead of trying to take them on head on. We're really going to focus on the mission. We're really building out a web infrastructure that's going to be as good as can be. So we'll have a digital storefront, and we're going to be marketing using stories and telling the stories about getting the stories out that are happening on the ground and giving folks a different option to take this thing that everybody's so attached to now and do something else with it. So, this is all, again, 4 months old. But people have switched to us already, and they've switched from some of the big guys, from the small guys, because they like what we're up to, and they're able to be an early adopter of something that we really want to create. I could go on for hours about that one, so let's just keep rolling.
Yeah, maybe just real quick. One of the strategic decisions we made really early on was to focus on having only two sets of constituents, workers and companies, and not to go after consumers. So unlike these guys, we're not focused on consumers at all, and maybe, who knows if that will be the right decision to have made. But that eliminated a lot of stuff for us in terms of marketing. It eliminated one huge area of marketing that at least we didn't have to care about as much. But beyond that, really the first cornerstone of marketing for us was coming up with team members. And I never thought about that coming into this, that the first sales you would have to make is selling somebody on the idea such that they would actually join the team. Once you've got that down, once you're able to convince people that this is something worth devoting part of their life to, then convincing other people of other aspects, I think, is relatively straightforward. Not super easy. I'm still probably most of the impact entrepreneurs that you meet are the most bearish around impact investment, for example. Very skeptical. But the companies that we've been able to work with have been we've been pretty progressive, and surprisingly so. A lot of companies you would not expect.
Thank you.
Who's next?
So I'm also a reformed physicist, but I was wondering, very initially, what were your growth strategies when you guys first launched? The question is called really, but how did you get your first 10, 100,000 users?
We haven't. It's been a very quick 4 years, and the number of users that we have had is.
So how did you get to the first?
Yeah. So what we did initially was, so going back even before the company, back when I lived in DC, I had the great fortune of having my partner, Maura, who is an engineer here in the Bay Area. She was an engineer in the Bay Area at that time too. So I didn't do anything when I was in DC for about 3 years. I saved a lot of money by not doing it. When I came out here, I had enough money to live, and I also had enough money to invest in the company just to try something. The very first thing we did was we went to, the very first thing I did was I went to India, and I just self-funded a pilot and said, like, let's just try some stuff and see what we can do. So that was the first thing that we did, was find somebody who has some technology that can just sort of barely work, get in front of some NGOs and nonprofits who are doing great work, and make that connection, pay the NGO to help us do something interesting, gather some interesting data, and use that as our first case study, and then kind of snowball from there. And it sounds really easy from there, but it was a very long 4 years. That pilot itself failed for like 9 months before I ended up convincing a great program manager who had previously worked at Cisco, that she joined the team. She took the reins, and all remotely, not even going to India at all, so all remotely, she snapped it into shape and got some really great data out of that. That later became, the rest of the company. So I think the first set of users, the first like 80 users or so, came exactly from that. And within that group of 80 random women who worked in apparel companies in Bangalore, heard of death of a child in a childcare facility, where a kid fell out of a crib onto a concrete floor like this. And completely unacceptable. These women have been complaining about that childcare facility for months, and nothing had been done about it. And now that happened, and it got reported, and the companies were sourcing from that factory, so we look into it. But the point is that you don't have to look very hard to find really strong message, a really strong story around this. And then building the company after that took forever, and we became almost 6 months away. Happy to talk about it.
Online. Thank you. My name's Adam. You've mentioned, most of you mentioned a bit about getting the consumer side on there to really get that driving things in the future, get it set up, and then get consumers from more developed countries, I suppose, to get involved with it. What do you see as the challenges to get that to happen, and how do you see that going? Is that going to be the sort of driver in the future? Maybe this is for Nishant, but also, yeah.
Well, for us, that's where the rubber hits the road, right? Because you don't make money, no money, no impact. So that's how we're going to be measured at the end of the day, and in terms of how we communicate that to people. And come on, when you get on the subway or you're doing anything walking down the street, and we now have this, this relationship with this little box that, to change that in any way has become sort of intrinsic thing that takes a little convincing. So how do we do that? How do we get the word out? How do we target that? Luckily, in the digital realm, it's easier, faster, better, cheaper than it's ever been to get the word out. We're just starting to sort of build that out, and luckily in this community we have some of the best minds to draw on. But it still remains our sort of undiscovered country. We don't know how, but we can look at other models. When you look at eyeglasses and shoes and other types of food and different companies that have done the one-for-one model, they've all been very successful at those. When you look at other, we've patterned, I have at least for a number of years off of companies like Patagonia and Whole Foods and others that are trying to do the right thing, that are admittedly not perfect, and there are a number of companies in the supply chain. I think some of the stuff that's being done in supply chain, Nike is an amazing company trying to do really, really great things. As an example, so there are just many, many examples, and consumers want to buy from a company like this, but you have to be there with pricing and quality. So if 7th generation's toilet paper isn't as good as Cottonelle, then you've got a problem. I mean, there's only so many people that are going to, go camping in their own house, right? So you've got to be there, and you've got to have the right partners. And for us, that our partner is Sprint. They're heavily committed to the environment. They're the only telco that's really recycling phones at a huge clip. 8 out of 10 phones that go out come back, get recycled, gets resold. Their environmental awards they've given us here are huge. So they were a very conscious partner for us that are everything down to our credit card processing, to our merchant services. We use new resource paying. So we're doing everything we can in the back end, and then that'll reflect out to our customers as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. So one of the great things about going back to the market question was, we already have a few hundred people signed up to the Kickstarter campaign to take the reward of the beta application. So as soon as we actually finish building that and release that, we have a beta set of users. And one of the things that we're really trying to do is, I think I, like many other people, my friends at least and family, grew up knowing that the rainforest needs to be saved, our greenhouse gas sink is being removed. But I went through, when I went to Amazon for the first time, the visual experience is amazing, the experiential component of what you do is amazing. But then there's a night hike we did where we closed our lights off, and it was just, again, for like 10 minutes. It's pretty freaky, but for 10 minutes you just hear every sound you can possibly imagine, and it was amazing. And we listened to our live recording on our website. It's sort of that relationship again that I don't know, I never knew what the rainforest sounded like, and it kind of brings it back for me. I wonder if everyone else had the same experience if they have been there, but I think you might. But that said, we're storing all of our data. So 8 hours a day of streaming data from rainforests all over the world. The number of animal and sort of fauna sounds we're going to have is amazing. We're going to also hearing the actual alerts, right? So we're storing that, and that's the data that we want to do a lot with. Cornell has a whole division dedicated to basically sound-based data analysis of species, right? Particularly endangered species. So if you want to hear the elephant in Kenya versus the elephant in India, hopefully 50 years from now, we're the ones who have that archive. Same thing with if you want to listen in real time, what the jaguar in Sumatra listens to the orangutan in Sumatra sounds like, you can do that. So we're trying to make it so that we can start to actually allow sound to be worked in ways that it hasn't done before, right? And so the mobile application for us is really, I don't know how we're going to necessarily use it directly to monetize besides the sponsorship I said, but maybe one day you'll have like a studying alarm or something. You can study the sound of the rainforest, something like that, and it'll be live streamed. But yeah, that's
very cool. Who's next? That's fine. We got time for a few more questions, so let's roll with you.
Developing
short and sweet.
Excessive network costs. How has it impacted your technical go-to-market plan?
Sorry, network costs? Excessive network costs.
In developing were expensive. So download a mobile app for a 4-person, expensive. How do you make them do it?
Right. So data, mobile data costs or the access to data, it is high. So we don't use it at all. We use so the most annoying thing about calling your bank is you get hit with an automated system. Press 1 for this, press 2 for that, right? So we use exactly the same kind of system for workers around the world to call into our platform. So it's an interactive voice response system. You don't need to have a data plan, you just need to be able to make a phone call. And then our job is to make it as attractive as possible, attractive enough that they want to call again and again to get the latest stories, the latest information that's available for our platform. So we kind of sidestep all of that. That's the short answer. Eventually we will move into other mobile apps and web apps and so But we're holding back on that right now because the common denominator for us is far and away the biggest.
Rainforest.
Yeah, so for us, the data cost right now, so streaming, let's say 50 to 100 megabytes of data a day. Right now, we're partnering with local telecoms who are providing that service to either offer subsidized or maybe in some cases no cost service for our application. But we're also trying to incentivize that relationship by actually providing telecom service for much cheaper or no cost, if you will, to a lot of the local population there too. So again, part of our model of how do we keep folks who perhaps are going to be out of a job if they're no longer in the illegal deforestation industry with some sort of incentive model. That's another relationship we're trying to build there. But yeah, we do have that cost. Again, right now it's been very low to non-existent in Indonesia. And I think that we'll find that to be not really a significant part of our cost. Particularly again because once we have the data that's been pushed to us every day, we're storing it in cloud servers that these days store as much as we want for a very cheap price.
Just a follow-up question, Sean, is are you then able to use, because one of the things that I've heard or seen about the work that you're doing is actually creating a mesh network among the phones themselves. Is that accurate? And then can you then use that network to provide connectivity to places that don't have connectivity yet?
Right. So we're not providing the connectivity right now to places that don't have it. I think there's an interesting vision there. We're just talking to our partner in Amazon, actually, who one of their goals with working with the 10-bay business is to actually bring connectivity to that region. And so we're one of these tools that can be used if connectivity exists. We're not necessarily creating that mesh network so far that's going to be the actual source of the actual provision of it. We've also been exploring with sort of different types of, I guess, flying machine partners and/or look at, Google Balloon, the big balloons in more areas where you can start to transmit data. So there's different ways to get connectivity. We're not necessarily that mesh network, but certainly down the vision might be something to think about.
Yeah, because one of the reasons I ask is because some of the companies that we talk to are looking to source. Sorry, go to biz dev team here. Some of the companies that we talk to are looking to source sustainable palm oil. And one of the challenges is that sustainable palm oil in some of these places, the forests are so far outside of the network. I wonder, is there a way to kind of trickle in? And I don't know, you guys have been thinking about this for a long time, but these companies would be willing to pay for this, and they'd be willing to pay a lot. So I don't know if there's a possible way there. We could talk about it offline, but I see a huge amount of potential there.
Good stuff. We'll go with you, and then you'll be next. So.
Thank you. This is for Rainforest. First off, I love the mole blossom. It's really beautiful. I'm curious about how well it weathers in the rainforest, and also how you maintain this sky. Do they zap out? And I'm sure you discover all that, but that's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, it's a great question. Part of it is discovery. So you're right. We're still in pilot stages. Really had one implementation so far, and going to 2 more this year. The Amazon camera, they were run a lot more. We have about 30 devices going out in Canada. So that's going to be a heavy data set for us. But we've designed it in a way that's waterproof, first of all. So that's hasn't been an issue so far. But in terms of actually maintenance, a couple things. So we have enough. Again, to overweight physicist is design this solar panel to actually work in a way that you have very thin, very temporary spurts of light come through the canopy, and normal panels won't work because you need to have the whole panel exposed to light. So you sort of kind of did a reinvention of the panels in the way that we laid it out in the series to be able to just get small spurts of light in certain areas to have enough to transmit energy. And so even a certain 20 minutes of light will actually power the device for like an hour, for example. But that said, even if it's a fully charged phone, it will last in the rain and darkness for 50 hours, maybe even more. That's great. I think it's maybe longer than that. But what we've also done is so far we think it's about a 2 to 3 year life cycle before we have to actually replace the device. And once it's in the tree, it really shouldn't move. And so we put in a sort of alert system that if the device ever moves, or by chance somebody tries to take it out, it actually triggers a tracking signal. And so at that point, we will know that it's been moved, and somebody either has to go in to check it out and repair it, or see what's going on, or see where it's gone if somebody is trying to take it. So that's kind of how we've been trying to do some of the maintenance so far. And again, beta version 2 here.
So, Michelle, you said that some of the things that you're trying to do offer more data over the foresting revenue. So, do you the internet switch provider for each piece, or how do you find the data?
So the data is not going necessarily. So I guess right now we are capturing with our web services, and yeah.
That was misinformation for me. I think that she was picking up on. I was suggesting that. That's not what we're doing.
Yeah, we're not providing any internet data services to
Okay.
local communities. So
And
I mean, it's not. That's definitely. I think this first problem is going to take us quite a while. So.
so this is connected to very consolidated project, Indosat or something.
Yeah.
If thought about doing so quickly, I guess internet service providers would have optimized to create sort of like a little Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I think
Solar hotspots.
Yeah, I think that'll be. I think the actual connectivity problem, if you will, as well as this idea of the mesh networks, as well as nodes that we want to set up, can be really exciting for what we want to do. It's not something that I think again we're focusing on right now. We're currently working in places where the access points by which trucks or loggers are coming in are pretty much known to the indigenous area. And for the most part, again, so far we've been lucky that there is some sort of connectivity within enough range that we can actually make our devices work. I think we're going to get very soon, for example, we're talking to the Guyana in Panama, and they don't really have a lot of service. So they're working on hexcopters. Hexcopters are the thing they're flying basically machines that can basically also transmit connectivity if we need it. So it's more right now us exploring areas of connectivity to basically be able to power our system versus being the source of connectivity.
All right. We got time. We'll do the 2 last questions, short and sweet, 1 and 2. So.
My question is for Nicole. I was wondering why you chose voice interface versus SMS for you guys to interface and constantly voice.
Mostly literacy, and USSD is high development costs, or potentially high, and I'm not a developer, so.
My question to you, it might be too soon, but have you had people trying to game it? Trying to game the sensor by, I don't know, maybe they play music, maybe they, I don't know, or is it too soon for that?
Yeah, let me know exactly what it is. I'm not the.
But what I'm saying
Somebody faking the signal, to block the sound of logging or something else.
Oh, yeah. No, not yet. So, but I think it is too soon. I think by the time, that'd be interesting. By the time we're at a place where we've got, if that's happening, either we're big enough and we're stopped enough deforestation from happening by people who want it to happen, that hopefully we've had an impact, and now there's a dual side of this advocacy issue here. But certainly not. I mean, right now it's very immediate stuff.
All right. Guys, this has been a fantastic conversation, getting to know all 3 of your burgeoning enterprises. So all 3 terrific ideas, and I want to thank everybody for coming by tonight. Again, this is something that we do every month on a different topic. Next month is going to be a real big event. We're going to get into the positive impact of travel and tourism. That'll be, do you remember what it is? It's the end of September, last Thursday in September, whatever that is. Information is on triplepundit.com, so check it out. And if we could just get a round of applause for our 3 panelists tonight. There's probably a little bit more beer left. We'll be hanging out for just a week.